What's something that you would see in a profile that you would just be just like, yes?
Books and sports gear.
Sports gear, okay.
I
won't ask any other questions.
I love a man in lycra.
Okay.
I can't help it. And so over the course of doing this therapy, I thought, this is wild. Why do we not have more open conversations about this topic?
Yeah.
Why are we not talking about our relationship to intimacy, to our bodies, how we really show up in dating, vulnerably? The stories we tell ourselves about ourselves shape the way we see the world, and hence how we behave in it and how we interpret experiences.
Our lens.
Exactly. The lens through which we see and experience everything. I think when you begin to date and look for love, because I still want love and intimacy, but without this idea that you're looking to find wholeness because you're not enough yourself, I think that's a massive game changer in then your kind of confidence and how you approach dating more broadly.
Emma Louise Boynton, hi.
I love the way you said that.
Ooh.
That was so sexy, sultry. Hi, Munroe.
Hi, how are you doing?
I'm really good. I was just saying, I'm usually the one doing the interview, so this is a role reversal.
I know.
And you usually get interviewed,
yeah.
so we're now swapping places. So
I know, well, I hope I do well in front of the pro.
Oh, no, you're going to be brilliant. In your hands, I feel very safe. So.
Well, on the topic of interviews, can we talk about sex talks and how you got started?
Straight into sex. I said I had no boundaries, but seriously. Yes, of course. So I started sex talks actually about 3 years ago now, which feels wild, as it honestly feels like yesterday, after personally going to therapy. It was something that I never really used to talk very openly about intimacy, about dating, about any of that. I worked in the newsroom. I was in politics, news and current affairs.
Oh, wow, pivot.
I mean, seriously, serious pivot. And so that was very much my bag. I thought I would go into politics, maybe be a politician. I mean,
really?
Can you see it? Maybe.
What would you be, like, what would your focus be if you did?
I mean, gender equality issues.
Okay,
Like, how do we have a more
Needed.
equal society? Well, exactly. Sadly, me and my fishnet tights are not walking into Westminster
There's time.
every day. There is time. I'm thinking maybe third or fourth segment of my life. Wait,
Okay.
maybe sixth segment actually.
Yeah.
But so I really didn't talk about anything to do with like dating, intimacy very openly. And I had just quite a bad relationship to intimacy, and that really came from my relationship to my body. I grew up with an eating disorder from the age of about 12, as I know so many people have suffered with.
Yeah.
And it just meant that I saw my body as kind of a source of pain rather than pleasure, something I was at war with rather than something that I enjoyed. And that really affected how I dated and how I showed up in intimacy.
Absolutely.
Because there was always this part of myself that felt like, I guess there was this point of shame in myself of like, I really didn't like my body. And I didn't cognitively realize that that was having an impact on my dating, but it definitely was. And one day I was at a dinner party, and it was when we were dipping in and out of lockdown. So it was like one of the like the out bits. You know, you're kind of like the purgatory, exactly. But you know, and you're kind of like socially kind of weird at that point. And you're kind of like on glitch mode. So
haven't been the same since, to be honest.
Honestly, me neither. But I was in glitch mode. So I don't know, something was happening. I was malfunctioning. And for whatever reason, I started talking to these two girls who I didn't know very well on either side of me about my relationship to intimacy and my body. And I just kind of I was like, yeah, it's just like not really, you know, I'm not like super into intimacy. Like that's not really my thing. I'm just, you know, it's just not really for me.
Yeah.
And both of these girls looked at me in horror and they were like, wait, what? Emma, no, like, you know, you can work on this. Like, you know, there's something you can change. And I was kind of gobsmacked. I kind of just thought that there was a bit of me that was kind of broken and that probably just in my brain, it was kind of my relationship to intimacy was kind of synonymized with my relationship to kind of food and my body. It was just this point of shame I just didn't really want to talk about and didn't really want to address. Nonetheless, they had both gone to see this therapist and they had become evangelicals for the cause.
Okay, amazing.
I know. Little did I know that a couple years later, I would become #1 proselytizer for the benefits of going to the specific therapist. Honestly, she gets so much business because of me. I should be getting a card.
We love that.
We
Shout
love
out
that.
to, what's the name?
Her name's Alex.
Okay.
She's fabulous. She runs something called the Pleasure Centre. So I was like, you know what? I've got nothing to lose. I don't have a great time when it comes to intimacy. It's affecting my dating life. I might as well have a go. So I started. I went, she was based in Australia. So we started on Zoom sessions. And in session number 1, I just said to her, I'm broken and you're not gonna be able to fix me, but listen, I'm like willing to try. And I thought we'd go straight in on here's the A to Z of what you need to do to fix yourself and your relationship to intimacy. Of course, it didn't go like that at all. And we ended up talking a lot about my relationship to my body. And Alex said something to me in session number 2, that has stuck with me and changed my relationship to my body in perpetuity. And she said, Emma, for as long as you're at war with your body, you're going to struggle to enjoy pleasure in that same body.
This is you didn't go into like being a performer, I feel.
Exactly.
That's how I felt until I owned, because like, you know, being trans, so much of it is in front of other people. There's other people's opinions. You kind of feel like, am I coming across how I feel? And then you end up living for other people. And that goes through all the way to your relationships, to your relationship in the mirror. You end up losing that part of yourself. So that makes complete sense.
And how then can you experience pleasure in your body if, as you say, you're performing? If you're performing that body and you're seeing that body.
You're not in your body.
You're not in it, totally. There's a, Marston Johnson came up with a phrase, I think it was in the 90s, about spectatoring, which is this idea that in the context of intimacy with someone else, when we're not able to be in our body, when we're feeling self-conscious about our body, we end up spectatoring. It's like we step outside of that body and we're watching everything happen. And of course, you can't experience the full depth and breadth of your body's capacity for pleasure if you're not able to sit in that body and be in it. Yeah. But I'd never really kind of I never really thought about that. And I thought, I'd been, trigger warning for anyone listening, but was anorexic when I was very young and then had been bulimic kind of ever since, but had not acknowledged it. It was just kind of this, the way I talked about it was very much, it was in the past, and I just wasn't able to acknowledge the extent to which it still plays such a huge part of my life and was this kind of dirty little secret that lived in the background that you would never guess when you met me, that I'd then go home and just have this very tortured relationship to being on my own and being in my body. And so when she said that to me, it just something struck a chord. And I'd done bits of therapy before. I'd gone into counselling when I'd been really, really ill when I was when I was in my teenage years and really struggling with anorexia. And nothing had worked, really, nothing. I mean, they kind of get you to stand on the scales and like, oh, okay, look, you put on a pound, go you. And you're like, whoa, I'm not mentally prepared to deal with that yet. Whereas speaking to Alex in the context, really focusing on my relationship to intimacy as opposed to going to her to be cured for an eating disorder, it just shifted something. And she helped kind of coach me into learning how to be my own carer rather than be my own enemy.
Yes.
And that was a game changer.
In how you speak to yourself.
Yes.
Once you're aware of it, it's so obvious. And I even find myself now, like when I'm lying in bed and at the end of the day, I'm a massive overthinker. So I will literally just lie there. I'll lie there and I'll go over everything. And if I don't go over everything, then it's like the possible scenarios and situations and drive myself nuts. But then there's a switch, because ever since I've been much more conscious of my own relationship with myself, how I talk to myself is almost like how I'm talking to a best friend. And do I want to give myself bad advice? And that's often what we're doing, is giving ourselves really bad advice.
But also just being cruel. Yeah. Like the stuff that we say in our heads, stuff you would never say to a friend. If they came to you and they said, I'm having this issue or I'm struggling with this, would you ever say anything that you're happy to then say to yourself? But we're the constant in our own lives. We have to live in our own heads, in our own bodies. And if you don't correct that mean girl energy that lives in our head, then you're going to live essentially with your own abuser with you at all times. And I think that is no way to live. And it's definitely no way to be able to enjoy the depth and breadth, the pleasure our body can provide for us. So I think in the course of doing therapy with Alex, who runs the Pleasure Centre, shout out, she's amazing, I learned for the first time, and I was 28 at the time, so it was a couple of years ago, for the first time I began to feel what it was like to feel pleasure in my body. So she got me to keep a pleasure journal, which was 5 times a day, write down something that gives you pleasure. So that could be my morning cup of coffee, the feeling of hot water going down my back, getting warm when you've been cold outside.
Okay, so a broad variety of things.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's things that weren't just, it wasn't about being intimate with someone else. And in doing that, it got me to be more present in my body and to get to learn what it felt like to be present in this body that I'd otherwise spent essentially the best part of like 15 years, more than that, desperately trying to escape.
Yeah.
And so over the course of doing this therapy with Alex, I completely changed how I saw my body. And I'm not saying, I mean, anyone who's had any issues with their body, and even sort of, you don't just get better overnight. But it shifted something, because suddenly I was seeing my body through the prism of pleasure rather than pain. And it did end 17 years of bulimia. After that, I thought, I can't be this mean to myself and to my body. And I think what that did, and it wasn't just that it improved my relationship to intimacy, which it did, but it improved my relationship to myself and to my body and to my confidence. It was like it began to pull apart this dirty secret that had been just eating away at my confidence. And I thought, this is wild. Why do we not have more open conversations about this topic?
Yeah.
Why are we not talking about our relationship to intimacy, to our bodies, how we really show up in dating vulnerably, not in a kind of showy way that sometimes I think can be how we talk about these things online. And I thought, if it can be so transformative to me, surely it can be just as transformative for me to bring these sorts of insights and learnings that I had in the therapy room to other people. And that's how it began. Incredible.
What a journey as well for you to like pass that baton on and encourage other people to find their route, because I feel like it's about finding the window, but you can't find the window if you don't know where the route is. So for me,
well put.
So for me, I think it was about self-punishment, because I'd been taught to punish myself, and gone all the way back to bullying in high school, to then, relationships and what I allowed for myself, and not necessarily thinking that I deserved anything else, and then not treating myself in the way that I actually deserved. And I had to go all the way back, but a lot of people don't want to go all the way back because it is painful. It's really tough.
What for you was the catalyst that then changed something in how you saw your body and how you related to your body?
Well, my issue was PTSD, but I was thinking about it in a post manner. I was thinking about it as if it wasn't actually trauma that I was living within. And I think once I started realizing that this is still something that is affecting my relationships, affecting my relationship with myself, affecting my ability to, feel confident and like I was worthy of things. And I was constantly either living in the past or the future. I was never actually present. And then I started, thinking like, how is this affecting me in all areas of my life? And I went on a journey in a completely different way with a different kind of therapy. And I think that that's also, something that is really worth mentioning, is that there's so many different kinds of therapy, and one way is not going to work for everybody. So it's really worth testing out different people, finding a connection with a therapist that sees you and understands what you're going through, and also just doing something that feels good for you. For me, sitting on a couch and talking about things isn't necessarily the best way for me. I need to feel it and see it in a different way, and connecting with my body. I'd completely disconnected with my body. I saw it as this thing that was in constant flux and change, but I had lost that ownership of it, especially doing a lot of that in the public eye and having so many opinions on how I looked or how I didn't look in their eyes, or even saying who I was as a person. It just completely disconnected me from myself, and I didn't know who I was. I knew who I was in a very surface sense, but when you got to the core, I just completely disconnected sexually, emotionally, in every single capacity. So it was a journey of, really getting back in my body, out of my mind, and learning that it's all connected. I don't need to feel like a ghost operating a robot. And it's something that I don't feel like we're really teaching young people. A sex education that is just purely a functional sense is woefully lacking in reality, but also preparing young people for the realities of life.
Totally. And relationship education, it's like the relationship that we have first and foremost with ourselves, as we've touched on here now, and then the relationship we have with other people. Like these are the building blocks of a happy life.
That and financial literacy. Like, what are we doing?
The two things that we do. You don't graduate knowing how to argue well, how to, be authentic and open in the context of dating and meeting new people, how to navigate through your own insecurities and not project them onto other people. Yep. We don't learn that, and we don't learn how to pay our taxes. No. And then we're like, okay,
which is so wild because that's the bane of everyone's life.
It's the two, like the foundation blocks. Like, we build houses on quicksand, and then when we're like falling into the quicksand and we're all like, help, and then we all have to go through all these different forms of like healing and therapy, if we're lucky enough to be able to, as you point out, actually to be able to recognize that we do need that help, that we then have to go through this journey. And I feel like that's kind of your 20s and 30s and probably for the rest of your life is actually on this kind of continual journey of trying to unlearn all the toxic crap that gets inculcated in us from such a young age. We have to unlearn all of that and then start from scratch. Yeah. Which is hard.
It's hard, but it's necessary.
And it's joyful because actually the journey that you then get to go on. Like I said this to a friend the other day. I never imagined that I would, like simple things, get to like cook a meal for myself at home and not have it couch in negativity and me being sick. I never thought I'd go on a date and rather than being paralyzed by anxiety and worry about what happens if we go back to his house, like, I'm going to feel so embarrassed and awkward and I don't know what it's going to be like. Now I'm like, let's go back. I can't wait. Fun. Like I so enjoy the like playfulness of intimacy in whatever form that takes. And I just never thought I'd get to that point. I thought I was kind of broken and stuck like that. So I think if you are able to access any kind of thought of healing, whether it's therapy or, as you said, and other methodologies that can help you address those historic traumas, it's so liberating. Yes. And it unlocks so many doors. You're like, whoa. I know. You get to the promised kingdom. You're
it's very wild to see yourself in a completely different way.
Yeah, totally.
But again, so worth it and necessary, I feel. We live so many different lives in our lifetime, and why not live the best one for you?
Oh, I like that. We live so many different lives in our lifetime. That's so true. Yeah, I love that.
Emma, fancy a game of blind date box?
Oh my gosh, I would love that. Thank you. Thought you'd never ask.
Yeah. Okay, let's go.
Okay, spin it.
Okay. When did you first learn about love language, and did it change how you approach relationships?
Oh, that is a great question. When did I first learn about love languages? I would suppose I learned about love languages like covertly. So with my first like long-term relationship, I think what made that partner stand out from the litany of non-partners and fuckboys that had come before him was just the care and the tenderness with which he treated me. And I realized in that relationship, without probably diagnosing it, like my love language is like kind of small acts of kindness, but it was just the way that he was very thoughtful with me, and I hadn't really experienced that before. He was very thoughtful, he was very caring, and it was in those little consistent gestures of thoughtfulness that over time allowed my nervous system to relax and feel at ease in his company and safe, and I wasn't feeling anxious and activated and wondering, when am I going to see him next? What's going to happen next? Is he going to, ignore me, which had happened before? So I think probably that was my first kind of covert realization of what my love language was, which very much is in those small little acts of kindness.
We love that. You've interviewed so many incredible people on your podcast. What's the most life-changing thing for you that you've learned?
That is such a good question. I always find it hard to think about what like the learning is, because I've been so privileged to get to speak to so many incredible people about everything to do with dating, sex, intimacy. But I think one interview that always sticks out to me is one I did with Roxy Nafusi, the Queen of Manifesting, a while ago. And very specifically, the whole kind of interview was premised on how do we essentially manifest the love or romance that we truly want in our lives. And a lot of what Roxy spoke about in this interview was how we so often go into dating with a scarcity mindset. And I think particularly, like, I'm in my 30s, I'm 32, a lot of my friends are getting married, having babies, it can feel like quite a lot of pressure, like, oh God, I'm falling behind. And I think it can definitely perpetuate that scarcity mindset of, oh gosh, time's running out, there's no good people around, so I just need to like puts you in that headspace of slightly like desperate and I'll take what I can get, which is a terrible mentality to go.
Then you start accepting things that you shouldn't accept, and you start, just going for, people because you feel like you have to, and that's not a place to be when you want to date somebody.
Totally. How do you have self-respect and boundaries when you feel desperate? You don't. You just you take the scraps that you're given. And she talked a lot about how we need to kind of move on from this perspective of this kind of scarcity mindset and go in with this abundant mindset of, first of all, saying, first of all, you don't have to find there's not this notion of the one is such a folly. Actually, just look at the life that you have and what you're building and all the joy and the goodness that is already there, and acknowledge that is enough, that you are enough alone. You don't need someone else to come in and kind of make you a whole. But then if you do want to find someone, go when you're going on dates, rather than thinking, oh God, I really hope they like me. I hope they think I'm pretty enough. I hope they think I'm confident enough. Go in thinking, are they right for me? How did they make me feel in this? And the reason I bring that up when you ask kind of what the most impactful interview was, is that I think even when I talk about dating all the time in my professional life, I really had gotten to a habit of dating from that scarcity mindset and not checking in with how I genuinely felt. And it was funny enough, actually at that time we did that interview, I was dating someone and on paper, the one. I was obsessed. I was like, this is exactly the person that I am meant to marry. He's so gorgeous, ticked all the boxes. I mean, not really, but we love to fantasize. Yeah. But what I ignored was that every time we went on a date, I was beset by anxiety. And we wouldn't see each other for ages. I was beset by anxiety. We texted all the time. It was just this, I was in the kind of throes of this, I was just so enwrapped in anxiety, but I just ignored that because on paper, he was the person I wanted to be with. Yeah. And so I think I really loved how she, reminded me to to really focus on how someone makes you feel rather than what they look like on paper. And then also highlighted something that has, I think, been a common thread to a lot of the interviews I've done on the podcast, which is that the stories we tell ourselves about ourselves shape the way we see the world and hence how we behave in it and how we interpret experiences.
Our lens.
Exactly. The lens through which we see and experience everything. And that story is a really powerful one. And you and I just touched on that at the beginning. This idea of this mean voice in our heads that's our kind of inner saboteur. That mean voice shapes how we go into the world. If we're saying, I'm unlovable, I'm ugly, I'm fat, I'm all these horrible things that we can attribute to ourselves, then when we're going into intimacy, we're going into the context of dating, we're going in on the back foot with that, I hope they accept me despite all these flaws that I am constantly reminding myself of. And what the kind of key to the manifesting process, as Roxy articulated it, and I fundamentally agree with, is that we have the power to rewrite our own stories. If you don't like the reality, rewrite the story. And I think that has just always stuck with me, and it's been something that we've discussed in myriad ways since, about how you take ownership of your story and the narrative in your head in order to change the outcome and affect a better outcome. Yeah. And much like you said before you go to bed, you mentioned before that there would be this kind of voice of going through all the kind of anxiety things. When you can retrain that voice, when you catch yourself going to the oh, you've done bad, catching it and saying no. Yeah. Okay, this has happened, or I did this, but I am strong, I'm powerful, I'm great. It's those small changes make such a big difference. And for me personally, changing the negative voice in my head has had a profound impact on everything, particularly how I date.
It just takes a very slight adjustment to change that narrative and get yourself out of that loop. And it's, a lot of it is our own behavior and how we react to things. For me personally, it was my resistance to change, but not necessarily the change that I make, but the change that I don't choose. And, the things that would come at me that I would think, well, this isn't what I want for myself, but it's actually the difficult things that allow you to grow. And it's how you react to it in a way that you're like, I can do this. Because a lot of the time we can, a lot of the time we're capable, a lot of the time it's not actually how we're seeing it. So when you get out of your own way and you switch the lens and allow yourself to think of things in a different angle, that's the crucial point of getting out of the loop.
But I think you make such a good point then, Munroe, around it's the small things. When we just make one small shift and we prove to ourselves that we can, it then I think acts as this and it propels us into imagining what else we can do. So I think it's when you get those small shifts right, when you change how you say one thing in your head, or you show yourself you can do one hard thing, you know, Glennon Doyle, we can do hard things, then it's like, okay, I can do this one thing. Now what's next? What's next? What's next? So I think you can unleash so much with that.
Absolutely. I actually read something that was so mind-blowing the other day. You know, in the 90s and noughties, especially with time travel movies, when someone goes back and they change a tiny little thing and it changes the whole of history as we know it and life as we know it, then why do we not think that about what we do in the present for our own lives?
That is such a good point. That gives me like joyful goosebumps thinking about that. That's so true. And I love those time travel movies.
Yeah. Bring them back.
Honestly, you try one tiny thing and suddenly it's like,
yeah, it's so true though.
Bring them back. Hashtag.
In terms of dating, modern dating, there's many ways to do it these days. What's one bit of advice that you would like to give to viewers about their own journeys?
Okay, so a little bit feeding on from what I was saying earlier about the trying to move away from having a scarcity mindset. I think the narrative around modern dating has become so negative. And I think that's been very much kind of propelled by a lot of kind of conversations on social media. And I understand, because I think often when you've been hurt, when you've been dumped, when, you know, you haven't had a date go the way you want it to, I lived through it many times. I'm on the front line of those dating battlefields. It's painful, and we have these wounds. And then when this kind of conversation online is happening of like, you know, all men are trash, dating's so tough, it's so crap, it's really easy to find solace in that negativity and to find reassurance in those conversations, because
her voice is the loudest as well.
Exactly. And we feel less alone.
They should be loud, but there's not as much balance as we think there is.
Totally, and you're so right. And I think there is a time and space for that. And it is nice to be held and they're like, yeah, it was crap anyway, didn't want him anyway, whatever it may be. But I don't think that we should allow those experiences to colour our whole idea and view of dating. Because what is dating? Dating is meeting new and hopefully interesting, some crap, but hopefully interesting, nice people, and hopefully going on adventures with people that you haven't met before and discovering a lot about someone you don't know. And in that process, discovering a lot about yourself. And I think when we go into dating with this kind of negativity bias of, oh, it's so crap, it's so hard, again, I think that puts us on the back foot.
Yes.
Because we're looking out for, like I interviewed this neuroscientist, Nicole Vignola, the other day. And we were talking about how we can apply neuroscience to dating, obviously. And something she said really stuck with me. She said, you know, we have a tendency in our brains towards negativity bias. So if we have a negative idea in our head, for example, dating is crap, it's so hard today now, we're going to go out looking to prove ourselves right. We're looking for evidence to prove our own theories to be correct. So if we go out looking for all the reasons why dating is crap, it's going to be crap.
Yeah.
And you know, characters, obviously there are myriad reasons why people can struggle in dating, and I totally empathize and understand with that. But I think for anyone who feels like they are struggling personally, I would suggest, first of all, that you kind of shift your focus a little bit and be like, okay, what do I want from this? What am I actually looking for? Like, am I looking for the one? Am I looking to have a good time? Am I looking for some great intimacy? What are you actually looking for? And then how intentional are you being with what you're doing?
How can you find the one if you're not willing to connect? If that's not the priority? You know, if you're going into a date, like a job interview, it's like you're expecting something from someone rather than, you know, connecting with them and allowing them also to get to know you. So
put up that wall.
Yeah.
Going on dates, not to out any specific profession, except to totally out one specific profession. People that work in finance, I have found, / private equity guys, date like like they are looking to acquire my company. So we sit down and they go, so what's the 5-year plan? How many dates do you tend to go on? You don't seem like someone who has a huge amount of time for dating. Do you have? And I'm sitting there like, all these answers are so manufactured. You know, my 5-year plan is this. So, you know, I want to grow my company to this. I go on this many dates. You're not just spending time with me. You're not actually trying to understand what it's like to just sit and chat, which is really the marker of, you know, what you've just said there. We need to be able to be vulnerable and we need to be able to be kind of authentic to who we are. But the only way we can do that is by just having kind of normal conversations and experiences alongside someone on a date. So I think the worst way we can date is to do exactly that, to sit opposite each other at a dinner table and then fire off all the kind of tick box questions. They also really don't give us a good idea of the quality of someone's character, what their values are, what they care about, what lights them up. I want to know what lights you up. And the way to know that isn't to ask you a million questions. It's to go and do the thing and see how like excited you get by that.
Absolutely. Conversations, not interviews.
Oh, like the conversations, not interviews. I'm going to say that the next time any private equity person grills me about my 5-year plan.
Maybe just don't date guys in finance.
Listen, I know it was one I think it was after one particularly like grueling interview in which I was like, are you going to ask me to send my pitch deck? Because maybe I should. And you know what? He didn't invest. So his loss.
Exactly. What's been your favorite guest?
Okay, I have so many favourite guests, but I love Paul Brunson. And
who doesn't?
Love
Shout out to Paul.
Shout out to Paul. I know last time we met, actually it was with Paul Brunson. He just has a way of making me, and I think everyone in the room, feel so reassured about dating and about love. And in whatever you're looking for and whatever you want and whatever your experience of dating has been, I find first of all, he is so read up on the research. The guy, I mean, he eats data for breakfast, lunch and dinner. So he comes armed with the science and the facts, which I find a really refreshing and helpful way of understanding dating and thinking about it. But something he said to me, I interviewed him on the podcast a year ago, and he said to me one line, which he says I've butchered, but I don't think I have. Yeah. And I've actually got the transcript, so I'm going to go back.
No pressure to get it right
exactly. I got the receipts, Paul. But he said, when we don't have boundaries in dating, we make bullies out of even the nicest people. And that stuck with me because I think when you're in a kind of scarcity mindset with dating, when you're a kind of people pleaser type and I really want to be liked, Munroe. I have to say, it's a character flaw. I really want to. We all really do, don't we? But I really want to be liked. And I think that I've, on occasion, gone into dates thinking, like, trying to work out who do you want me to be and then try to perform being that person, particularly when I really fancy someone.
I think that's something that a lot of people, if not everyone,
really
can relate to.
Okay, good. Okay, I feel reassured. Because you feel like you're trying to... in trying to work out what is the kind of person that you'd find attractive, and maybe if I can contort myself into that person, then maybe I'm enough and I'm acceptable. And I think when he said that point about boundaries, it just made me realize that when we don't assert our own boundaries, we also don't give the other person the opportunity to be vulnerable with us. Because what we're saying is that when we're boundaryless, the other person doesn't really know what, like, when they've broken our boundaries, when they've offended us, when they've taken a step too far. And equally, if we're going in with that mindset, we can't expect them to be setting their boundaries. So if you're always kind of second guessing, like, oh, is it okay if I said that? Oh, should I have done that? All these things, you're second guessing everything. That's probably because you've set a precedent where there isn't clear communication, there aren't clear boundaries in place. Where if you go in with boundaries, if you're clear with what you want and what you expect and the kind of treatment you expect, in turn, the other person, you can expect that they're going to do the same. And I think you just get off to such a much better start, particularly when meeting someone new.
Great advice. How important is physical touch, such as hugs, kisses, or holding hands to you in a relationship? Oh my God.
It is so important to me. I'd say it's like the number one thing in making me feel safe and making me feel cared for. But what I would say is maybe not too soon. I want it immediately. I want someone to be holding me, touching me, putting, their hand on my leg as soon as I fancy them. I want it to feel quickly, very intimate. And with someone I've dated recently, I'm going a few dates with, he's kind of taken it quite slow. And actually, I kind of love that because it means that it means more. So that as we get to know each other better, the sense of familiarity and intimacy increases. And I feel so calm and so safe in his presence and with the buildup of this intimacy. And I had to catch myself and be like, oh, this is actually really nice. Not rushing into that quick intimacy, but actually building a foundation of stronger intimacy is proving to be quite a nice experience.
On the subject of advice, for someone that's, on their journey of self-care and also self-love, what would you advise for them to get going on that journey? We were talking about how we speak to ourselves. That's a process that's very difficult to get into. How can someone get into that path?
I love that question. I think it's such an important one. And it actually came up I interviewed the wonderful Sharmadean Reed, who isn't she fabulous? Like infinite knowledge, like serious infinite knowledge, and so wise.
Massive overachiever.
So much so. Being in her company, you're like, whoa, just go. But we had a conversation a while ago when her book came out, New Methods for Women, and someone in the audience asked, how do we begin to repair our relationship to ourselves when, you know, we talk a lot about self-love, but what if I can't love myself right now? And I think it's a really fair question, and I think it is a lot to ask. If you've had a hard relationship to yourself for your whole life, I think it's quite unrealistic to expect that one day you'll look in the mirror and be like, I love myself. And or you buy like a new bath product and suddenly you love yourself. That's a lot to expect. And Charmaine's advice I thought was brilliant. She said, rather than focusing on, do I love myself? Think, do you like yourself? Do you like the way you walk? Do you like the way you talk? Do you like the way you make people feel? Do you like the way, you say hi to people, and welcome them into your home when you're hosting? And I really like that, because I think when we can take the pressure off of kind of self-love and focus instead on the bits about ourselves that we like, I think that goes a long way to helping us build up a more positive relationship to ourselves, which I think then is the foundations of eventual self-love, which I think we can grow, but I think it takes time.
I think also self-acceptance, because that way you can decipher what you have done and also, what other people have done to you when it comes to shame. And also maybe guilt, grief, and all of these massive feelings that are so difficult, that often get convoluted and, combined, and it's very difficult to decipher what is going on. I think acceptance of what has been in order to push forward to what can be is actually a really good way as well. And then also getting to, the point where you like yourself. So I think acceptance for me was a massive game changer, because I was so resistant to the past. I didn't want to accept it, didn't want to admit it. And also, a lot of the ways that I'd reacted out of a place of trauma that I wasn't necessarily proud of in previous relationships. I think it's a great place to start, along with liking yourself, is accepting what's happened.
I think that's such a beautiful way of putting it, because I think, I mentioned before the work I did with that therapist around kind of my body image issues. And a huge part of that was making peace with my body. And it wasn't about loving my body. It wasn't about waking up every day and being like, oh, this is the best body ever. It was just about making peace with it, deciding actively that I'm no longer going to punish it. I'm no longer going to wage war against this body, which really is my only home on this. In this lifetime, this is all I get. And I think the way you articulate that in terms of acceptance, that's really how I understand making peace with it. Making peace with yourself and making peace with the past. So that it's acknowledging that these things have happened, these experiences have happened, these traumas have happened, and they shape who we are and how we live in the world, but they don't have to define who we are going forward. And so I think when you can just make peace, when you can accept yourself in your fullness, in your wholeness, I think that, to your point, Munroe, is really the first step we take to then cultivating a much stronger relationship with self, which then allows us to advocate for ourselves in the context of dating, of intimacy, because we kind of back ourselves a bit more. We're not kind of spliced in all these directions with all this kind of unresolved stuff. We're saying, I accept who I am, I accept my past, and you can go in and then advocate, this is who I am, so goddamn treat me right.
Absolutely. Oh, great advice. We're loving this. Can we talk about traditional romantic narratives? Because I personally don't believe in the one. I don't believe in the one. I believe in many ones. As I move through my life, I change. And what I need sometimes will expire with a certain partner. That sounds really callous. I don't mean it like that.
You have an expiration date, honey.
I just mean in terms of, sometimes you can't fulfill what your partner needs. I mean, I'm also, I don't necessarily identify as polyamorous, but I mean, that's kind of what I do. It's more like kind of by action than by identity. And also just, open relationships, I feel very comfortable in them. So I don't necessarily resonate. I think obviously if you do, then I completely respect that. But for me, the idea of the one just has always felt very limiting and also quite dangerous, that like I will just go for things that may be slightly wrong in my head, but are actually very wrong because I don't want to let go of this person because I may never get a chance again and I may miss the one. So can we talk a little bit about that?
Oh my gosh, yes. I mean, what you said there is so right in that if you have this, I think the notion of the one really underpins the scarcity mindset in dating. If you only get one chance at like great love, then of course, then you hold on to things, much to your point, you hold on to things, relationships when they've passed their time. You hold on to the idea of this kind of, this love, this, the romantic ideology has been so pervasive within our culture. It shapes our cultural psyche in such a profound way. And what I really take issue with is how I think it inculcates in all of us the idea that until we find that other person, we somehow lack something quite profound. Yeah. There's that in ancient Greek mythology, there was Plato, I think it was Plato, yes, Plato said that at the beginning of time, we were all like one, people were all like one connected thing. And then Zeus basically wanted to punish us all because we did bad things, classic humans. So he split everyone in half, and it was men, women, etc., men, women. And for the rest of our lives, we were condemned then to find our other half. And that's this kind of Plato's idea of love, is that you spend
stressful.
So stressful. You spend your whole life looking for your other half. Yeah. But that has pervaded popular culture and our idea of love and romance forever. Yeah. This idea that, and I think, growing up, I was drawing my wedding dress at age 10. I'm actually deeply bereft that I'm not now married to Draco Malfoy or Bradley from S Club 7, but here we are, Munroe, navigating.
Shout out to Bradley. Bradley, get in touch.
Well, exactly, Bradley, if you're listening. He's got a kid now, lucky. But I really did subscribe. I thought, I was waiting for the one. And I think as I broke up with a long-term partner in my mid-20s, and we stayed together. I think a lot of it was through believing this is my one, don't let go, even though this doesn't make us feel right. And for the rest of my 20s, I really had to grapple with this sense that I was waiting to find my other half, my Platonian other half, in order for my life to truly, fully begin. And when finally I was dating someone, kind of a short-term relationship, and he dumped me quite unceremoniously, and I was really upset. But there was something in that I was like, I thought you had come along to be my adventure partner and to introduce me to all these wonderful experiences that I felt I was waiting for a guy to facilitate me having. And I think when he dumped me unceremoniously in my friend's bar, so mean, and the place we went on our first very romantic date, I thought, you know what, fuck it. I'm not going to wait around to find someone to give me these experiences. And I went on my first solo holiday. Then I went on a cycling trip on my own. There's me speeding down a ginormous hilltop in Pollenza wearing lycra and those awful sunglasses. I'm not a cyclist.
I'm sure that you started out.
I honestly, I actually didn't. I looked hideous, but whatever. No one saw because I was on my own. And I just began, it just shifted something in me, and it changed how I saw what I was looking for in love. And it wasn't I was looking to find someone to help me do all these things. I was like, no, I can do them on my own. And also I have the most incredible best friend who I believe, as far as soulmates go, she's definitely one of them. And I'd sit there thinking, well, why am I feeling this sense of lack in myself when I'm sitting next to one of the best people I've ever met, and we go on the best adventures, and I can go on the best adventures on my own. And I think when you begin to date and look for love, because I still want love and intimacy, but without this idea that you're looking to find wholeness because you're not enough yourself, I think that's a massive game changer in then your kind of confidence and how you approach dating more broadly.
Absolutely. I think this also brings us on to the subject of heartbreak, because I think there's a lot of that in heartbreak. And, when we lose someone that we have not lose, but, when we are no longer so connected with somebody that we've been so connected with for such a long time often, or even it doesn't even need to be that long, but a significant energy and a significant amount of time for us. I think that feeling of wholeness can be impacted. And it's very easy to drop into that hole of, I'll never experience this again. Who am I without this, this thing defining me as a pair or more, if you're that way inclined. But I think that narrative of the one kind of imprints on us. And when we break up with someone, we end up back.
You lost your one. Yeah. And that's it.
Yeah.
Now you're out.
Yeah.
Totally. And I think that's why it is such a damaging narrative. And I think when it comes to heartbreak, there's kind of no two ways, but you had to go through the pain. And I think that's the hardest thing to reconcile with. No one wants to feel pain. No one wants to feel bad. It's so uncomfortable. I've tried on so many occasions when I've preempted, like something's not been going right and I kind of can feel a relationship is coming to an end and I don't want it to. And I've said to my sister so many times, okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to just preemptively plan other dates here, do this. And she was like, no. You are preempting the breakup that you don't want. And in doing that, you're breaking your heart now and he will still break your heart. So your heart's going to be broken twice. And I think that's just it's so true. Some things come to an end. And sometimes prematurely, sometimes, sooner than we want them to. But move through that pain, knowing that it's not the end of your relationship to love, but you have to move through it. You have to let yourself feel it in the knowledge that one, you'll come out the other end eventually, having learned a hell of a lot and a much better version of yourself. And you will find other people, you will find other ones, because much like you said earlier, there are many ones. But I think what we try and do, especially now, I think especially in the current climate with dating, I think there's a lot of like defensiveness and I think kind of shy away. I definitely speak myself on this. Shy away from being vulnerable because we're so scared of being hurt. I think particularly when you date when you're a bit older and you've got a bit more experience underneath your belt and you have had your heart broken a couple times, and it can mean that you date a bit defensively. You don't want to open yourself up to love because you're like, no. I've done this before. I know, I know where this goes. But actually, this is what makes us human. Like, heartbreak is the other side of the coin of love. You've got to stay open. And, the highs are high because the lows are lows. And I think rather than putting ourselves off from being vulnerable and being open with new people, lean into it, knowing that the pain might be awful, but so will the love. So go into
Absolutely. So when it comes to modern dating and, in the interest of being vulnerable, what advice would you give to somebody about setting up their Tinder dating profile?
Great question. I think really put yourself out there. Put it on, I was like, put it on the plate. Put it on the profile, not on the plate. Put it on the profile. When I first started app dating, so when I first started using Tinder, I felt a bit like, I'm not going to put too much effort into my profile. It was kind of like a weird misplaced arrogance of I didn't really commit to the digital dating. It was early on. It was many years ago. And I refused to put too much of my own personal information there. And I kind of felt a bit disconnected. And I think that's such a massive shame. I think digital dating is, most people now, the majority of people now meet their romantic partner on an app. This is how we date now. There's nothing to be ashamed about. There's nothing to I think be negative about. So I think put effort into your profile in the way you would if a friend set you up. You're not going to show up half-heartedly if a friend sets you up on a date with someone they know. In the same way, I think put love and care into your profile. What do you want to say about yourself? What do you want people to what do you want your first impression to be? Show me what you care about. Show me how good you look in sportswear.
Showcase yourself.
Showcase
I think
yourself.
That's what it's about is not providing an idea about who you think people want you to be. Just show yourself and allow the right people to come to you.
Totally. And I think give more information rather than less, because I think that helps us to kind of sift through the people that we meet digitally. Really give me all the indicators of who you are and what you like. Write all the use the prompts, really showcase quite a kind of full 360 view of your life and what you love and what lights you up, because that way our first impression's a good one, and then I'm going to swipe right, and then
What's something that you would see in a profile that you would just be yes?
Books and sports gear. I'm a basic bitch.
Gear, okay.
I love
I won't ask any other questions.
I love a man in lycra.
Okay.
I can't help it. Listen, my CrossFit gym is filled with lycra clad men. Isn't it lycra? What you wear when you exercise? When it's sweaty and it's hot.
I guess lycra.
It is lycra, isn't it? I love lycra. Men in trainers. I love it. And then books. Show me that you read. I want to know, because that is a window into your soul and your mind. So show me tell me what you're reading and ask me what I'm reading, because I feel that's such a good conversation starter. Yeah. Because then I'm like, okay, cool. This is where this is the world you've chosen to delve into in your spare time. Tell me about it, and I'll tell you about mine.
Perfect. A woman that knows what she wants.
Exactly.
Emma, thank you so much for joining me on the Empower Hour. And if you want to hear more from Emma, you can check out her podcast in all of the good places where you get your podcasts.
Thank you so much for having me on. You're brilliant.